He is holiness itself, beyond the power of thought to grasp or of word to express, beyond the power of all praise.
He is an almighty God. He is not only the creator, He is the sustainer of everything that is. If God ceased to sustain this universe, it would collapse in a moment.
And standing on nothing, He took the hammer of His own will, and He struck the anvil of His omnipotence, and sparks flew therefrom, and He caught them on the tips of His fingers and flung them out into space and bedecked the heavens with stars.
We are beginning a new series, a 7-week series on the person of God. Our small groups, our children, we're all following the same study for the next upcoming weeks. And as would be expected, I'm taking a theological approach to the study opposed to a philosophical approach, where a theological approach begins with the idea that we presuppose that God exists. Where a philosophical approach begins with everything's on the table and there's really not a starting point. Everything is okay, nothing is a given. But I want to be upfront with what I'm not trying to do, what we're not trying to do for the next 7 weeks. And I'm not trying, as I just mentioned, I'm not trying to prove the existence of God. And it's not an apologetic slant where I'm not trying to defend the existence of God or who God is. And I'm not looking at the attributes of God, like His omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence, or any other omni we could think of. What I am doing is I'm trying to set us on a path that will lead us towards a lifelong discovery of this person that we call God, or that we refer to as God. More specifically, I want us to be able to reverently embrace the unsearchableness of God, that which we will never be able to understand, what would be a mystery. And that whatever is a mystery about God to you and to me, instead of it being a stop to my learning or a frustration, or that it would lead to doubts, that actually the mystery would lead to a life of awe and wonder and to more worship. Anselm of Canterbury, he's an 11th century monk, and he was a theologian, he's a professor. He's made famous for something called the ontological argument. But he also stated that God is that which no greater can be conceived. God is that than which no greater can be conceived. And we think, wow, he was made famous for that. I could have wrote that. Right? We think about those things, that if there is a God, and even skeptics and atheists would agree that if there was a God, then they're intrinsic in the name God. There would be nothing greater. There would be nothing superior to the person, because it's in our definition of what God is. Anselm also believed that there were two ways something could exist. First, it could exist solely in our mind as an imagination. He said, like yellow unicorns, or you pick the color of the unicorn, pink unicorns, blue unicorns. It can exist in our imagination, or it could exist both in our imagination and in real life. So like a cookies and cream milkshake from Chick-fil-A, that can exist in my mind, and it actually exists. I'm so glad that it does actually exist. He also believed that the only way that something imagined or thought about in your mind could be greater is that if it had a real version to it. And again, we think, man, monk, theologian, philosopher, very famous for these things. We know this stuff. We could have said those things. We could have been famous like Anselm of Canterbury. You know, if the only way something greater could exist that's in our imagination is if it would really happen, if it would be a real version of it. So we know that. Like, I know some of you guys, some girls, y'all are looking for that special someone, right? You're looking. And right now, you won't admit it, but you single people, you have this idea and this picture of that just right person. Right? You think, what could be better than that image that you have? Him or her, right? That would be better. That's the only way that image could get better, is if there was a real life version of that person. Or those of us who are planning a vacation for this year, we're thinking about it, and one day I want to take my family to Colorado. We've been skiing. My wife and I have been skiing many times, but my girls haven't been skiing. And I look forward to the day they be on the, right up the lift and get off on the slopes. And the first time that we get to go and crash together and just be together, and they get to experience gliding down the snow together. But the only way that's going to get better, as I can imagine in my mind, is that when it actually happens, in the day that we as a family are going down the slopes together, and we're staying at the lodge, and we're going to the little villages together. Now, I think that most of us would conclude, and I think that most atheists that I have interaction with, I have contact with, and most skeptics that I have contact with, and friends of mine, that they would agree with the idea that if God would exist, then there could be nothing greater that could be imagined, because just that's the definition of God. Now, if you are a Christian, that presupposes that you have a perspective of who God is. It means you have an idea. I'd love to be able to hear your idea of God and what we would call your portrait of God. And your portrait of God has, you've arrived at your portrait of God because of many different life events. So some people are very angry at God, right? Because maybe a death in the family or an unfortunate thing happened to you. And so God is mean, God is bad, God's not powerful, God's not in control. Or things have been really good for you. Or maybe you've worked through the bad and you have greater faith in God because He's brought you through it. Or all the voices in your life that's told you about God. Teachers and parents and friends. So there's a culmination right now as you sit here. There is a portrait of God. You have a portrait, a picture of what you think God's like. Not so much physically, but in His character and His nature and why He does things. And a portrait is subjective. A portrait is how you view something from your angle. So you think about if you go to a carnival or you go to the fair and you have that person that's sitting there and you pay money so they can draw you and make you look really silly. And that person will accentuate certain features on your face, right? Now, I've never done this, and I'm scared to do it. I don't want a caricature of me because I know exactly what they're going to make big. I'm going to have this big nose about this big, and my eyebrows are going to be so bushy you can't even see my eyes, and my eyelashes are going to come out here, like I got fake eyelashes on. So I'm not even going to pay my $20, $25 for me to be embarrassed by this person. But what they're doing is they're drawing a portrait of you as they see you. And that's what our portraits are. It's what we think somebody is like. And there's so many different portraits of God just in this room. So many different definitions, so many different ideas. You think about most civilizations ever, since the beginning of time, had some idea of God. No matter how abstract or how concrete or how weird or how accurate it may be, they've had this idea. You think about Greek mythology. They've had portraits of God. Egyptian civilization, Babylonian. And you go all through the times. Individuals have this idea of who God is. People across the world from us have different ideas of who God is. And that's to be expected. I remember as a little kid, I'd ask my mom, how do we know that we're serving the right God? Because there's people across the world. They're being taught about another God, and they're thinking the same thing about us. They have a different portrait. Like if they would draw God, their portrait would be much different than the way that I would draw God. And the only way that we would have the ability to know if our portrait is true is if there was an actual object or being or person that we could compare the portrait to and put it side by side and say, oh, well, here's the differences and here's the similarities. See, you'd have to have a photo, really, to make sure that your portrait is accurate. Because what a photo does, a photo captures the image not from your perspective, but actually as it is, captures the essence of that. So if, me and my daughter, Ambry, we were drawing a portrait of you. We just came up here right now and I said, okay, smile real big. And you smiled and I started drawing your picture. And she was drawing your portrait as well. And then at the end we would compare. There would be differences, right? If you drew a portrait of somebody in your family and you had someone else draw the same portrait of someone in your family, there would be differences. You know, you may put a halo on somebody, and the other one may put horns on somebody, right? No, she's got horns right now. You know, there's going to be difference. But if Amber and I, my daughter, if we took a picture of you from the same angle, and then we compared photos, the photos would be exactly the same, because the photo is capturing the essence of that image. Now, since God is so beyond us, remember it, just intrinsic in the name, since He is so beyond us and He is unlike us, it is probable and likely that there are gaps between how we see God and who He really is. Who would I be, a creature of the Creator, to think that I would have God summed up? And that I would be able to describe to you, this is who God is exactly. I think all of us should come to the table, especially in the topic of theology, theos, God, ology, the study of. We ought to come to the table with an immense amount of humility to realize who we are in comparison to the person that we are trying to describe. We're limited. We don't have the capacity. There are many theological questions that I don't have an answer for. And frankly, I'm okay with telling people, I simply don't know. There are 2 to 3 questions that when people come into praise, they usually like to fire my way and say, so what does praise think about this? And I tell them, if you're looking for a pastor or a church that has a pastor that has God wrapped up in these things, Praise Church is not for you. And I say that respectfully. I'm just telling you, there are some things about God, sovereignty, free will, that I can't totally understand, because it is so far beyond me. And I've heard intelligent theologians on both sides go at it and use Scripture to back their point. But there are some things I will never be able to understand. How can certain things about God coexist at the same time? It's like, you know, on caricatures when you're drawing, and the people at the fair are drawing these things and they're accentuating the nose or the eyes. We tend to do the same thing about God. We look at God and we study God and we go, oh, here's my portrait of God. God is a God of love. He accepts everyone. I'm okay. You're okay. Do what you want to. He's all forgiving. He'll just take us all in. And there's other people, they accentuate the prominent feature of His holiness. And they'll go, you better do this or you're going to be in big trouble. You got to do this or you don't do this. And then other people will say, oh, He's a sovereign God, or He's a pure God. And yet we all have to have this intellectual humility. That creates the mystery. That creates the awe and the wonder that when we come before God, that we'll never have Him wrapped up simply because we don't have the capacity to. We don't have the capacity to know everything about God. But that doesn't mean that I don't pursue to try to know and to make my portrait, or the God that's in my head, look closer to the God that's in the photo. I don't have to know everything about something to believe in it. You don't either. That's why you can fly on an airplane. That's why you can talk on a cell phone. You can do things and you'll enjoy the benefits of stuff that you can't totally explain how it functions. But I have enough proof in my mind of God's existence that I can't deny it. In fact, and I tell my friends this, who aren't believers, I believe it would take more faith to be someone that doesn't believe in God than it does to believe in God, because there's way too much stuff. Anatomy and physiology changed my views on this when I was in college and studying the body and all the systems that work together, and just on and on and on. But I don't have to know everything about something in order to believe in it. So the gaps that exist and will exist, they do not have to lead to doubt. And I want you to know that. I think it's liberating for some people in our church to say, just because you don't have God figured out, it's okay. Let it lead to wonder. What you don't know about God doesn't have to close you off on the process of pursuing Him or stop you and be frustrating to you. And how did He ever get here? And how did He create something? And who created Him? And what's eternity like? And how could He come to a virgin birth? You don't have to let those things stop you. There's enough things to build your faith for you to go, oh, that's good, because I don't want a God there I know everything about. Then He becomes more like me. I don't want to create him in my own image. Many years ago, I did a series here at Praise Church called OMG. And during that series, I recommended a book. This book, actually called The Knowledge of the Holy by A.W. Tozer. I guess some would call it a classic. I love this book. I've read and reread it many times. I would recommend it to you to read it alongside this series in the next 7 weeks. It's kind of like a supplemental reading for you to advance your devotion and your learning. When I scheduled this study months ago, knowing that this was what we wanted to start the year with, and we wanted our small groups to stay together, I sent a text to one of my friends, apologist friends at Stand to Reason. We often bring Stand to Reason in, and they're experts on some topics. And I said, look, we're talking about the person of God. What books would you recommend me to study in preparation for this? And one of the books, among the many, was The Knowledge of the Holy by A.W. Tozer. And let me just say what he says in the preface. He says that, in general, we have lost the concept of the majesty of God. We have accepted a low view of God. And because of that, that's caused 100 lesser evils in our life. He said those evils, or those things, how it's affected us, is that our worship has been dampened. We're not able to worship God with the passion and the reverence as those who have a high view of God. He's holy and he's majestic and he's full of grace. And as if God was here, how would you respond to him? And it's like responding to God in ways that Moses responded, where when he just knew he was on common space with God, he's just taking off his shoes. He's falling on his knees like Isaiah and saying, woe is me, I'm a person who's undone. Because they got a picture, their portrait of God began to grow. And he's saying, we've got a lower view. We don't have a majestic view of who God is. And it's caused these things where our worship is dampened and we don't have the ability, or we don't withdraw to meet with God in silence. Like Psalms 46:10 says, to be still and know that I am God. Be still and recognize. He said we need to rediscover the holy because it's impossible to keep our moral practices sound and our inward attitudes right while our idea of God is erroneous or if it's inadequate. So he said we must think about God more nearly as he is. And one of my favorite quotes from the Bible, and we've used it before here and hopefully we'll keep using it, says this. This is from A.W. Tozer. What comes into our minds when we think about God, it's the most important thing about us. The history of mankind will probably show that no people has ever risen above its religion. And man's spiritual history will positively demonstrate that no religion has ever been greater than its idea of God. Worship is pure or it's base, as the worshiper entertains high or low thoughts of God. For this reason, the gravest question before the church is always God himself. And the most portentous, that means the most important, I had to look that one up. The most important fact about any man is not what he at a given time may say or do, but what he in his deep heart conceives God to be like. We tend by a secret law of the soul to move towards our mental image of God. But were we able to extract from any man a complete answer to the question, what comes to your mind when you think about God? We might predict with certainty the spiritual future of that man. And when I'm reading this, I always think, yeah, because my perspective of people, it does affect my interaction with people. So if you walk in and you seem aloof, seem like you're not interested in talking to me, my perspective, my portrait of you will cause me to interact with you a certain way. I will pull back. I'm not going to push myself on anyone. Let's give you your space. Because, that's my portrait of you, and I want to respect that. What I see of you often influences how I interact with you. We do that with public. We do that all the time. Let's just say that you're in a long line, a traffic line, you're going to a football game, and you're along the interstate or the feeder road waiting to get in a parking lot. And there's a police officer, and he's directing traffic. And when he gets to you, he tells you to stop. He's got a hat and a badge. He has a gun. He has the belt. He's all in uniform. And because of your portrait of him, he's got authority. He's a police officer. I'm going to stop. Because your portrait, your perspective of him determines how you're going to interact with him. Let's just say you see someone jump out of a car who wants to get a cut, get ahead of the crowd. There's just an average person dressed in normal clothes, and they get in front of you and they go, stop. You're going to go, I know you didn't. Who are you to make me stop? You don't have the ability, because we have a portrait of him. We have a perspective of that person, and you don't have the right to do this. So this is going to affect how I interact with you. If you go out to play basketball and you get on the court and someone shows up that's 6'7", that's going to affect how you interact with them, especially when you're 5'8". Now, if there was someone that showed up that was 5'2", I may try to take it, to the rim, instead of having to shoot a 4-pointer, make up a 4-pointer. It affects our perspective of people, affects our interaction with people. And that's all Tozer's saying. Whether you realize it or not, your idea of God affects way more emotions, ambitions, your hopes, what you think is going to happen in the afterlife. It affects way more than what we give credit for sometimes. Just think of this. Your portrait of God will influence your understanding about why certain things happen in this world, which will either lead to hope or despair. Why is this happening? When you have a biblical worldview and thinks that God knows what's going on, He's still in control, you have some hope. When you think He doesn't, His hands are off, He doesn't know what's going on, there isn't a God, then everything is left just to happen by, coincidence or whatever will happen. Your portrait of God will determine your level of trust in God, whether there is trust or there's not. You think about your greatest anxiety right now. What's causing you the greatest stress? What's on your mind when you go to bed? What do you wake up thinking about? Your idea of who God is, your portrait of God, will determine how much of that will control your life with anxiety. Some people say, I'm going to trust in the Lord with all my heart. He knows what's going on. And what that would do is result in at least a bit of peace, some peace, guarding your heart and mind. Whereas if you don't have a grand perspective, a majestic perspective of who God is, then you're just going to be up in arms and filled with anxiety. Our portrait of God will influence the way that we respond when we sin. When we judge, when we lust, when we covet, when we fall into the hole that we have always fallen in. So what do we do right when that happens, when we sin? Well, if you have this portrait of God where He's an angry God, He's a holy God, He's an angry God, He's a wrathful God. Just what happens all the time in churches. People will not approach God because they can't approach. It's like approaching an angry father. I can't go to Him. He's angry at me. And I'm not going to talk to His people either, which means that people will stay away from churches because they're scared, they're embarrassed. They have this picture of God, and this is how God's going to respond. But what if you had the idea of what Jesus said God was like when He talked about the prodigal son, where the son represented me, went off to a faraway country, hurt his father, spent all of his money, but when he came back, where was the father, and who does the father represent? And Jesus is trying to tell you, I'm trying to tell you who God is. The father is out looking for his son, and the son comes back, and what does he do? So if we have a picture of a God like that, then when I mess up, and I do mess up, and you mess up, when I sin, and I do sin, and you sin, it's not like, I can't talk to God, I can't say my prayers, I can't worship. No, it's like, Abba, Father, Daddy, I'm sorry I hurt your heart, but thank you so much that you continually accept me. I want to please your heart. I want to come back home. And we hear Him say, welcome home, son. I've been looking for you. The day you left, I've been looking for you. See, it affects the perspective of God. Our portrait of God affects how we interact with Him. It affects your worship. It affected your worship today. See, a majestic God, a holy God, a graceful God, a God that came and intervened in your life, and you can taste that and you can feel it, and it's so real. It's when you sing the song and it reminds you, sometimes you can't even say a word because words are so inadequate to express. You just sit there and take it in because your words can't even get across what your heart is saying, and you just want to kneel or you just want to respond in some type of way because you're getting a higher view of God, and the way that you perceive God, your portrait of God, will affect your interaction with God. A high view of God, a view of His majesty, will result in living with awe and wonder, where you don't wake up in the day and say, I have to have another day. It's like, wow, I get another day. And you open the front door and the skies, whether they're blue or gray or rainy or sunny or whatever, say, this is the day that my God, Elohim, has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. Thank you, God, for giving me this opportunity. It will open up wonder when you study things to say, wow, God was really smart to develop this science, to develop all this technology. Or when you do your work, you will do it because of inspiration from God, or there will be things that will continually blow your mind. It won't be dull. How could it be dull when you have a God so majestic that's created this world and is allowing us to partner with Him in His creation? You come together, your worship would be passionate and reverent. You're going to trust without hesitation. Let's pause in the hesitation. How would you pray if you had a high view of God? As the Hebrews says, let us approach the throne of grace with what? Anybody know? With confidence, with boldness. He sympathizes with our weaknesses. And when we have a high view of God, it's like, I come to you, God, and I'm able to present my request to you because I know that you care. Our prayers would probably be bigger. It'd be so wimpy prayers because we serve a big God who's the God of the impossible, the God of the supernatural. And though we will never, ever completely comprehend who God is until we see Him face to face, we can continually close the gap between what our portrait is and what the photo is. You think about, you've known people 20 years, 30 years, you've interacted with people for 10 years closely. And you would think by now you would know them completely, right? There's times that you've known people for 30 to 40 years and they did something and you thought, I thought I knew you. So if we're not going to know each other who we have direct human contact with and interaction with, why would we think we would be able to wrap up or completely know the person of God? I mean, if anybody should know who God is, it would be Paul. Paul had a direct interaction with Jesus on the Damascus Road. But yet, he's in Romans 11. He's given a very difficult teaching. And I think he realizes it's a very difficult teaching. And that's why he comes out with verse 33, where he says, here's the teaching, but he comes out with, oh, the depth of the riches of God. Oh, I mean, the depth of the riches, the depth of the riches of God. Oh, the depth of the wisdom of God. How unsearchable. What does it mean to be unsearchable? You're not going to find it. How unsearchable are His judgments? How inscrutable are His ways? You think Paul had a high view, a majestic view who God was? He says, for who has known the mind of the Lord, or who has been His counselor? I love it. Oh, the depth of the riches. Oh, the depth of His wisdom. How unsearchable. You know what that means? There's always going to be mystery. It's okay to have mystery, because if there was no mystery, then God would be like you. It's okay to have an unsearchable God. It's okay to have a God that you can't wrap your mind around. In fact, that's a good thing. You don't want that. How inscrutable His ways. That means it's impossible to fully investigate and to discover who He is. One of the reasons why we do have intellectual limits. The main way that we learn is through our 5 senses. This will always be a mystery to us, and it should be. There is no category for God. There will never be a category. The only category that you could make for God would be the other category in which no one else or anyone else could ever occupy at the same time with God. God created us in His own image, but we aren't free to create God in our image, nor will we ever be able to do that. So give up on this idea of being able to figure God out completely. That doesn't mean you don't pursue God. I don't want you to hear that. I'm saying what you don't know about God should open it up for mystery, to lead a life of more and greater awe and wonder. Why would He do this? I can't get this in my head. I can't figure God out. Wow, blow smoke from the ears. Holy, beyond me, greater than me. I mean, just think about some of the things that we are considered as basic foundational truths to the Judeo-Christian ethic, beliefs, like creation. We go, where did God come from? How did God create? Do you think that for any time you are ever going to solve that, if you believe in the creation account, that you're going to solve how God did that? My mind can't go there. Your mind can't go there either. We're bound by intellectual limits. I mean, some people would say, they call it an eternal regress, where you say, well, this was created, so who created that? And then once you find that out, then you say, well, who created that? Well, who created that? Instead, on the natural sense, there would be eternal regress, that you'd keep on going. Who created that? Who created that? Who created that? Who created that? That's why, to me, it just makes more sense that there is something outside of the box of nature that is out here that had to get the ball rolling. Or there would be an eternal regress. That there had to be something outside the box. Something that we would call or refer to as supernature, supernatural. And you think, there's nothing. What does the Scripture say in Genesis? It was formless. It was void. Nothing. And the Spirit is hovering over the deep. And all of a sudden, God creates with words earth, man, plants, animals. And you think that we would ever be able to understand that? Let the mystery of that blow your mind, because your portrait will affect your response to Him in times of success and times of failure. And what you will do with your life, where you will go for Him, whether you'll say yes or no for Him. The incarnation is another thing. Jesus being born of a virgin. Jesus was fully God and fully human at the same time. In our minds, two disparate natures that they can't exist together or coexist together. What about this? This doesn't have anything to do with the physical sense. What about this? God so loved the world. Why? After a creation that turned its back on Him, why would He continue to do that? And why would He want to spend eternity with redeemed sinners? Why would He even want to be with us? Right? If you created something that turned its back on you over and over and over again, it'd be like you take the person that's hurt you the most in this life, or it's betrayed you the most. And you take the whole list, whether it's 5 or 10 people, and you're going to send them an invitation, and you're going to throw them a lavish party because you want to celebrate them. Why? What about eternity? You ever thought about eternity? You ever tried to get your mind around that how long is forever? Like you think it's going to close here, and then no, it's a little longer than that. 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 And then it's a little longer than that. It's a little longer than this. So what are we going to do all this time? It's a little longer than that. It's a little longer than that. And eventually my mind's probably like yours, just stops. It just says, stop. You're not going to get anywhere. Just stop. It's painful. It's like, it hurts. So I heard the story of a student who asked his theological professor, how would you describe eternity? And the professor says, well, consider a mountain 1 million miles high, and the mountain's made of marbles. Every 1 million years, a little bird comes around and takes one marble, then flies away. Then it comes back in 1 million years, and it takes one more marble, and it flies away. And it does this until the mountain is no longer there, and that's eternity. Then he looks at the student, and he says, does that help you understand eternity? The student says, no. The professor says, it doesn't help me either. Come on, there's some things that just should blow our mind. It should blow our mind. And we should give thought towards it, because what that will do is cause us to have a high view, a majestic view of God. And the way that you perceive, or your portrait of God, will affect how you interact with God. You know, in Daniel 11:32, it says the people that know their God will do great exploits. The people who know their God will stand firm and do great things. Does that make sense to me? Because they have a big God. They don't have a limited God. So no wonder they would do great exploits. No wonder they would say yes. No wonder they would go for whatever God says to do. And they would do it without question, because their God is able. John Calvin, he said, when the Scripture shuts its sacred mouth, let the Christian desist from inquiries. When the Scripture shuts its sacred mouth, let the Christian desist from such inquiries. God has given us all we need to know. Maybe not all we want to know. But He's given us all we want to know. All we need to know. And He's done that through general revelation, and He's done that through special revelation, which we'll talk about in this series. Herman Bovick said all theology is ultimate mystery. And theology is simply, theos means God, ology means the study of, just the study of God. All theology is mystery. Let me say it again. What you don't know about God, and what you can't comprehend about God, does not have to stop you from being confident in who God is. You will never be able to understand God's ways. They're inscrutable. You'll never be able to find Him completely. He's unsearchable. You'll never be able to repay Him a gift for what He's done for you. You'll never be able to know completely His ways. They're higher, they're far, they're deeper than ours. But it doesn't mean that you can't have confidence in who He is. There's way too much that we can know. And we don't have to know everything about something to believe in something. Paul gives a good example of it, because the scripture that I read to you, remember I said that he was coming out of a very difficult teaching. And then out of that teaching he goes, how unsearchable. And I want you to see how he ends that, to show that his mystery led him actually to worship, a greater awe and reverence of God. So once again he said, oh, the depth of the riches, and oh, the depth of the wisdom of God. How unsearchable are His judgments. How inscrutable are His ways. For who has known the mind of the Lord? Or who has ever been His counselor? Who has given Him a gift to which He might be repaid? And here's his response. And here's how he ends. And if you had your Bible, your physical Bible, you would read as the heading, it would probably say doxology. Dox means glory. Speaking glory for. Speaking glory, a worship of God. And after he says all that, or who has given a gift to him that might be repaid, he says, far from Him, and through Him, and to Him are all things. Look at this. To Him be glory forever. Amen. Amen. He says, how unsearchable, how inscrutable. Who knows the mind? Then his conclusion. Just because I don't know everything about Him, because there's a lot of mystery and I don't understand this teaching, for Him, for from Him, through Him, to Him are all things. To Him be glory forever. Amen. So be it, is what he says. The mystery of God, it can open us up to a life of awe and wonder. I can't figure God out. Good. Sit and think about it, wonder on it, meditate on it, chew on it. Let it overwhelm our human capacity. So, just the idea that we can't grasp it should blow our mind. In the book, or in the series, The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis, this book's The Prince of Caspian. Lucy and crew, they're in the wilderness. I think the crew has fallen asleep, and Lucy hears someone calling her name. She's not knowing who it is that's calling her name, and she wants to pursue who that is. She looks up at the trees, and the trees kind of have human-like features in its limbs, and human-like but tree-like features at the same time. She says, they are almost awake. Not quite, said Lucy. She knew she herself was wide awake, wider than anyone usually is. She went fearlessly in among them, dancing herself as she leaped this way and to avoid being run into by these huge partners, these trees. But she was only half interested in them. She wanted to get beyond them to something else. It was from beyond them that the dear voice was calling. She soon got through them, half wondering whether she had been using her arms to push branches aside or to take hands in a great chain with big dancers who stooped to reach her, for they were really a ring of trees around a central open place. She stepped out from among their shifting confusion of lovely lights and shadows. A circle of grass, smooth as lawn, met her eyes with dark trees dancing all around it. And then, oh, the joy! For he was there, the huge lion. This is representing God. Aslan represented God. Shining white in the moonlight with his huge black shadow underneath him. For the movement of his tail, he might have been a stone lion. But Lucy never thought of that. She never stopped to think whether he was a friendly lion or not. She rushed to him. She felt her heart would burst if she lost a moment. And the next thing she knew was that she was kissing him and putting her arms around his neck as she could and burying her face in the beautiful, rich silkiness of his mane. Aslan, Aslan, Aslan. Dear Aslan, sobbed Lucy. At last! The great beast rolled over on the side so that Lucy fell, half sitting and half lying between his front paws. He bent forward and just touched her nose with his tongue. His warm breath came all around her. She gazed up into the large, wise face. Welcome, child, he said. Aslan, Aslan, said Lucy. You're bigger. That's because you're older, little one, answered he. Not because you are. I'm not. But every year you grow, you will find me bigger. Not because he is bigger. And the closer we get, and the more we move our portrait to his photo, the clearer, the bigger, the stronger, the more majestic, the more holy, the more greater he will become. Not because he's changed, but because you got closer. And you have a better vantage point and a better picture of who he is. May we always be on a journey to see God in his holiness, in his beauty, in his love and his majesty, making our portrait resemble his photo. Amen?